Okay, so I've brought you guys all here to talk about Faith. Faith is, in this situation, is a fully automated integrated testing helper. Basically what we've done is use Jenkins to automate Behat, JMeter, and Wraith. For those of you who aren't familiar with Wraith, that is our going to be our visual regression tool, and it's going to do screen captures and comparisons for us. This is pretty slick, and while Behat is a very powerful tool and JMeter does its job, the Wraith tool for me is a really exciting discovery because I think it can save us a lot of time on a lot of very repetitive tasks. But let's go ahead and we'll talk about Faith. Basically, Faith is a toolbox and a process. One of the important things to understand about Faith is without the toolbox, the process won't work. Without the process, the toolbox doesn't work. So we kind of need them to work together. You could do all of the things in here without a process, but basically if you try to generate a ton of deliverables and you have no organization and process to it, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of data that really is kind of useless to you, and all of a sudden now you're the NSA. And we don't want to be the NSA because they have a whole bunch of data that they don't know how to sort through, and it's getting them that far. I want to make sure that our data is in order and that whenever we need it, we can refer to it very easily. So what is our agenda for the day? We're going to talk about what is faith and why do we need it. We're going to talk about the benefits of faith. We're going to talk about the faith process. We're going to talk about the faith toolbox. We're going to talk about the investment. We're going to give credit to everybody who's been helping on this. And we're going to talk about faith moving forward, things like some more cross-browser testing, integration with Druid, putting it in a virtual machine, all these fun things. And at the end, we're going to do a live demo and Q&A. And basically, to get through this quickly for you all, the live demo part is mostly automated, so it really consists of me clicking buttons. So if we save our questions for the end, it will help us to get through this more quickly, because otherwise you end up at the end with me trying to fill the time with nonsense while the things build. So if you can hold your questions, that's great. If you're like me and you're afraid you might forget your question by the end, feel free to type it in the chat or pop it out. I'm not going to not answer you, but it will help us to get through faster. So why do we need faith? I did learn in Ukraine, you guys do understand what this picture represents. So we want to save our time and our sanity. We want to increase our profitability. We want to provide better testing coverage. And this to me is probably the one of the biggest needs. We want to be able to produce reports and deliverables efficiently and consistently. And we don't want to have to spend a ton of time doing this. So I've automated that process, and we're working on fixing it up a little bit now to polish it some. I wanted to provide a record of all testing activities. This way, if somebody comes back and says, we don't think you tested it, we can show them that in no uncertain terms, we did test it, and we can probably identify where maybe the things that they're seeing have occurred. And it reduces the repetitive task fatigue, which leads to boredom and lack of perception. Now, I don't know if repetitive task fatigue is actually a psychological dysfunction, but I know I have suffered from it, where you've done the same thing so many times that if you do it again, you're surely going to go bail off a bridge somewhere. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. So what are the benefits of faith? The benefits of faith for your QA person are it allows them to run regression tests quickly and effectively. The tests can be reused, which is good for those of us who test the same sites over and over again on multiple environments and all of that. So that will reduce a lot of that repetitive time. And it reduces the dependencies on specific testers in the event of illness. So next time Alex decides to go off and gallivant into Georgia to go skiing, it's not as big of a deal because we have everything in a system that any of us can run. And the knowledge transfer comes down to kind of what's coming up in the sprints, and any of the QAs who've used the faith process should be able to look through what he has and easily identify what's being tested and things like that. What are the financial benefits of faith? We always want to learn about the money. It's extremely cost effective. I can tell you up until I've got everything up and running on 3 computers at my house, various other computers out in the wild, and 1 server, and it hasn't cost me a dime yet. Jay did donate server space, which at some point we'll need to resolve, but for now it hasn't cost anything, and my assumption is we have server space and that this wouldn't be too much of an additional hit on it, if any. We will save time through automation, which means we will save money. We will provide targeted testing results, which will save money because instead of spinning wheels trying to find where something broke, we should have better information. And this will allow the teams to react more quickly to issues. So if I find something, I'm able to provide Victor with a lot more detail on how I found it. And if he can view the results of the automated testing, he can very easily see the steps to reproduce and how we got to where we are and what the error is. What are the faith benefits for the team? We will provide more interesting work. This is maybe subjective. I would rather beat up Wraith and BHAT than rerun the same regression tests over and over again. To me, it's a little more interesting and challenging. And it's better to play with new technology than do the same thing. It will provide a consistent testing environment. So I should be able to sub in for anybody on short notice without a lot of onboarding because of the environment that's set up. It will keep the team involved and committed to the process. If we see this is working and we're doing it well, then people will be committed to helping it to work. And it will reduce our frustration, which comes back to our sanity and these such things. We all have days when we go and find a closet in our house, and we scream so our family doesn't hear us, or we go for a walk outside. And I hope that some of this will reduce some of those days. And what are the archival benefits of faith? Since I've started here, people who've been here as long or longer than I know this, but I'm a documentation nut. So of course I wanted documentation. I've learned in my year here that getting that upfront documentation is sometimes challenging, and we sometimes don't have control over that, and we have to work with what we have. And as a result, it makes our job more challenging in the end. My hope is that less situations like that occur, but that when they do, we will have records to prove what we did and understand what we did the next time and things like that. And that this will help. Having the documentation during the process will alleviate some of the times when we lack it at the start. These results will be shareable. The PMs will be able to decide on an individual basis how they want to share them, if they only want to share them with the team internally, or if this is something they want to share with the clients. They can be put up on a server and shared that way, or they can be sent via email automatically, whatever your choice is. We've published to a shared location so anybody can access them. It will provide a consistent record of our activities, and it will give us an archived record of testing activities. My goal is eventually to have it in a document management systems of sorts to make it very easy to search and find the information you need. So those are the benefits of faith. So what can faith do? You've told me the benefits, Krista. Now, can you tell me what does faith actually do? Well, in one click using Jenkins, Faith will set up or update the website that you're going to work with. It will run any configurations that you may need on the site for a testing environment. On a big site, I may not want to pull down all the images, so I might stick something like stage file proxy on there so that I don't have to. And if I do it in Faith, it's not going to negatively impact the developer's environment. I can install some testing modules and tools if I need to use it without impacting them as well. And I can run all my regression tests with BHAT. I can run all my visual regression tests with Wraith. I can run performance scripts with JMeter, so while I still have to write my scripts in JMeter, I can easily call them from the command line and know that they've been done every time and been documented. I can run Drush commands like code or site audit. I like Drush recipes, so I use those a lot too. I can capture screenshots logged in or logged out. I can create deliverables, and I can provide all these results in a consistent manner, and more importantly, without making a lot of what we all feel is busy work for people putting documents together. The system will automatically do it. This will allow your QA to identify the parts of the website that have changed visually or require manual retesting for functional issues. It will reduce wasted regression time by providing this targeted information quickly. It will identify untestable or unstable builds quickly. So if I get a build and 75% of it fails because we forgot to upload something, or the visual wall fails because we forgot a CSS file, we know immediately and we can deal with those. Those are probably examples that you would know immediately anyway, but sometimes they're more sneaky. We will create consistent reports and keep record of our testing activities, and provide these deliverables and customized to the project needs. So whatever your project needs, I will come in and I will set up the deliverables package for what you need, not make any unnecessary work on your part. And I will do all of this without impacting the development environment. That was actually one of the goals of this. I found in working on the Rio project that sometimes I have tests that I know are going to fail for a couple of sprints, and that can make it very frustrating for the developers. So one of my goals was to create a system that operated outside of your system to do this. So what can't Faith do? It can't replace test planning or test case writing. Yes, kids, I'm still going to want test plans. And if you're doing a faith-based process, I will have a faith-based test plan template that you will use for it, and I will help with the first revisions for the platforms and things like that. It can't plan our automation or write our BHAT scripts. It can't replace manual testing. There are just still some things that BHAT won't test, or that just can't be tested and require human eyes to look at them. It can't replace device testing. Technically it could, but not on real devices. You can tag it into BHAT or into Browser Stack, but everyone knows how I feel about that at this point. And it can't anticipate changes. However, on a positive note, on the can't slide, it can identify these changes very quickly and allow me to ask a developer, why is the logo purple now? It's been green all of this time, and get a quick answer and kind of be done with any changes and not stumble through as I find them. So that's what Faith can't do. But as I told you in the beginning, Faith is a process in a toolbox. So as I thought about the process and how our sprints work, this is the process that, to me, it seemed to work the best. I have reviewed this with the entire QA team and a few developers and PMs input, and we think this is a good process. I'm definitely interested in hearing what you guys think about it. And to make this easy, I broke this into 3 sections. So we have the time before we get a new build, which I'm calling the pre-game setup. We have the actual testing execution time, which is going to be your game time. And then we have some work we have to do after we're done testing, which will be our post-game time. So let's talk about each one of these phases. The pre-game setup is getting your site set up within the Faith framework. So if it's a new site, setting up the new site. If it's an old site, checking on it, making sure it's ready to go. Once the site's set up, you'll want to run, and your tests are all ready to go, especially in the case of a site you've worked on before. And a new site, you might not have a lot of baseline tests generated yet, but in a site you've worked on before, you would have some baseline tests ready. So you would run those baseline tests, generate a deliverables package to be able to make sure we haven't broke anything, make sure nothing has changed on the site since the last time that we tested it, right? We would be able to publish or email the results of this and share them as we needed to. We would prepare our new feature automation tests, our manual tests, get all our tests written for the upcoming features, and be prepared to test those. So now we have our last build or our newest build. We have a set of baseline tests, and we have all our tests ready for when our developer gives us our new build. So that brings us to game time. And the first step of game time is Victor says, Krista, your build is ready to go. It's available and you can get started whenever you're ready. So the first thing I'm going to do is, if needed, run my baseline tests on the build. If I didn't do this in the previous step, make sure that we're still in the same place that we were. I'm going to update the new build within the faith framework. So I'm going to make the changes that Victor has given me. And I'm going to run those baseline tests because these are all our existing functionality that, to our knowledge, hasn't changed. If it had, we would have updated our tests or we would have created new tests. So in some cases, maybe I expect to see a failure, but if I do, I should know what that is and know ahead of time. But we would run the tests to make sure we hadn't broken anything from the in previous work we had done. And we will review these results, compare them to the baseline results and to previous information. And once we do that, we're going to have 3 courses of action to take, right? We're going to need to address the issues found during automation. And the first and the least frequent, we hope, is that the new build fails miserably and we send it back. We don't want that to happen, so we'll get it out of the way first. What I think may be the most common scenario is we write up a few bugs and then we go in to execute our new automated tests, execute manual tests, and finish the rest of the testing that Wraith couldn't do. The optimal solution we want, everything passes and we just move on automatically to our manual tests, new automated tests, any of the new work that we're doing. So that gets us through our test execution, and we would repeat this as needed for builds based on the scenario and the amount of work that's being done. The last part of it would be our post-game cleanup. So when I get done with a project, I can't just get up and walk away. I'm all done, contrary to some belief, but you can't do that. You need to do some cleanup work. So we want to fix any of the scripts that we had troubles with, address any issues with those, get our scripts cleaned up. All of the new scripts we wrote for the new functionality, we want to integrate into our baseline tests. They have now become a part of our regression suite. This includes manual and automated, although manual would not be put into Faith per se. They should be updated in your documentation and somehow attached to the whole Wraith system so they can be easily found. We'll rerun the baseline tests to make sure that all the tests are working and that the site is still passing. We'll review these results, and depending on your project throughout the sprint, depending on how often you're delivered a new build, we would at the beginning plan how often we would generate these baseline scripts to ensure that they were doing their job but not becoming overbearing in any way. And we'll prepare a report that basically gives you a summary of all of the deliverables and provide all deliverables to the team or make them accessible on a server. So that is one more. And we'll archive all our sprint results in our report. So that is our Faith process. I don't think it varies too much from what we do now. I think it's just adding some automation and ways of being able to compare to a baseline. What is in our Faith toolbox? So I told you it's a toolbox and a process. The toolbox, these are all things that existed in the world before. I just found a way to use them that suits our purposes. So the first thing we had to do is we have to get a task management and a framework built. This was the fun part. Jenkins is our task manager. We picked that because everybody loves Jenkins. Our developers use Jenkins, and you can share jobs and things like that. It's probably, as far as I know, the best tool for the job. We're going to use Drush because, well, Drupal insists on it. We're going to use Drush recipes because they make my life very much easier. If I write one recipe, I share it among all my builds. I can repeat the same thing over and over again without a lot of problems. We're going to use Selenium Server. We're going to use Ruby and Java for supporting all of this insane stuff we've built. And we're going to use some miscellaneous tools that we've put together for the creation of the deliverables. And these are all pretty commonly used in the market. So there's nothing unusual or strange here. For our functional regression testing, we started off with Behat. And the reason we chose that is because that's what our clients are insisting on. But Jenkins nicely provides integration for PHP unit, simple test, and JUnit. And we would be happy to look at these moving forward, or any other automation tools. If there's other tools you guys think that would be useful in this toolbox, or a client comes to us and has a new request suddenly, we would be able to accommodate those requests with this system. For our visual regression testing, we are going to use Wraith for visual comparison. This is a tool developed by BBC. It's actually quite powerful. It does a lot of what the Pfizer screenshot tool does, but at this point, I'm getting mine to work on 300 URLs pretty quickly. And the beauty of this package of this toolbox is that it is flexible. So if Pfizer if they get the SST working and it works well enough to and consistently enough to be a valuable tool, then we would not use our tools and double up on that. Their faith package would work to integrate what the tools that the client provided. We wouldn't be doubling up on this work. We're using ImageMagick for image manipulation and capture, Ghostscript for deliverables, and some miscellaneous other tools that we had to put in here to support the creation of deliverables. For performance testing, we're of course going to use JMeter because again, our client's choice. I think we can do some integration with BlazeMeter, and if there's other, I know a couple of people have mentioned some other performance tools, we can definitely include that, take a look at including those. But in a service-based industry, we have to remember our clients' needs come first. So I try to stick with, if we have a client that insists on one tool, I think it's best to try to use that across the board, unless it's just a really hanky tool. So now that I've said all that, and next question everyone wants to know, of course, well, how much is this going to cost me, Krista? So what is the investment? Luckily for us, this is all open source, so our software investment is going to be minimal. As I've proceeded, I found a few little places we might have a little cost if we want to actually include Safari in this, because Apple is Apple. Some little things like that, but the cost should be pretty minimal. There might be, if we decide we want to use Browser Stack as a solution for some of this, we may need to upgrade our Browser Stack accounts, but that is something we're already spending on. And that can be decided on a team-by-team basis. If a team wants to do this and they have the resources to do it, then it could be integrated into there. So that's something we can look at on either a program-by-program basis or across the board. But it's not I don't believe it's a huge investment either. And it is an investment we're already making. Just making sure we have the hardware space to support this and that type of thing. Getting this set up locally is a bit of it isn't the easiest thing. It can be done, but it requires patience, tenacity, endurance, and a lot of coffee. I can actually get it done pretty quickly, but I've done enough of them now. I know what all the issues are going to be. So we actually do have it running on a server now, and the only thing that should have to be installed locally is Behat, and in my opinion, everyone should already have Behat installed. So we want to do some work to straighten up their Behat environment so they're consistent across the board. But we will want to make sure that our QAs have the necessary equipment to do the testing if we decide to do it in their program. And we will need, system maintenance and support. So of course, if we have a Unix server sitting somewhere in the world with all of the stuff installed on it, somebody has to make sure it's still working. We have to make sure that it's updated. We have to make sure it's secure. We have to make sure that we've trained everybody and that we've gotten that all done. And actually, we do have Tim working to help us to put together training materials and things like that, and working through and testing my wonderful install process. And that's depending on your Ruby setup can be as challenging as you like. I'm finding Ruby is and Brew together are having some issues, but they're work throughable, and it's just figuring out how to get through them. So moving forward, what do we want to do with Faith? We want to look at the feasibility of cloud versus local setup. As we've progressed this week, we're finding the best setup is looking like a division between the two. At this point, seems to be the overall thought, and that if we can set up a script to install Behat, we will be heroes in the industry. We will share it and be heroes in the industry. I'm not kidding. We're going to investigate standalone versus software as a server across browsers. So this is basically if you're going to use a Selenium grid and run them on your native browsers, or if you're going to use Browser Stack to do it. Because we definitely want to do cross-browser testing. If we can't do cross-browser testing on this easily, we're missing the point, I believe. We want our Yarlen and Druid integration. We would like the Druid was actually some part of the inspiration for this. We talked about integrating some testing tools into Druid, and Krista, being Krista, said, well, if we're going to do that, we might as well build a whole testing framework, right? So we would like to look at making sure that we can work together happily with Druid. Platform integration, so making sure it's going to work well with the MCGs and fusions of the world. Additional performance and performance testing features, as I mentioned. We want to clean up the archival system, give it some version control, polish our deliverable documents so that they look very professional and they don't look like we just spit them out of whatever open source software we found on the internet. So we're going to enhance those, and we're going to add, as I said, some JUnit and things like that. And as I said, we can add new tools as we need to. Last things last, let's give credit where credit was due. I did not do this on my own. I had much help. So I think Shirley's on the call. Let's give Shirley a thank you. She provided PM input and helped to turn my technical blah, blah, blah into something a little more appealing to people who don't like technical blah, blah, blah. Andrew has been working weekends to get Ruby and things installed, and last night his being on the beta program, and he had a little bit of issues because his whatever newest version of beta iOS gave him a little bit of a headache, but he's been a trooper. And as somebody who will always tell me the truth about if something will work or not based on the time involved, as much time as he had to put into the setup of this rate, he loves this Wraith tool and did definitely see the power that it has and how much time it could save us, all setup time aside. Jay has been our Unix guy. He has donated us a Unix server at this point. He's provided a lot of developer input and helped me out a ton. I couldn't have done it without him, I have to say. Sergey is helping with some QA input, doing some PC setup and testing for us over there in the Ukraine, making sure that any of the connection and virtual machine stuff we set up is actually going to work. And I mentioned earlier, Tim just joined our team, and he's going to help me with digging into these deliverables tools that we've got, doing some research, testing, documentation, and training. And on that note, I want to thank them all for their help. I have two of them on the call here. Thank you guys very much. I could not have done this without your help. And truly, last things last, we're going to do a live demo. And everybody who's done a live demo knows they go notoriously terrible, and I've had a really good record, so I am expecting this one to not. So off we're going to go. And this is the Q&A time. So cues, anyone? All right.
Basically waiting to learn more.
Okay, very good. All right, so all my devs know what this is. All my PMs have heard. All of us curse about Jenkins and how much we hate him. My husband at this point thinks I'm having an affair with a man named Jenkins. But, you know, Jenkins is doing a lot of stuff for me, so I kind of am liking Jenkins. But basically what I've done here is I set up a demo for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to install a new build, but if you put in theory that, this is for demonstration purposes, say I'm downloading a build instead. This could be, you know, so much more than just doing doing an install of build. But to make sure that we know what I'm doing, here is where this site lives. I need Jay here to make the sound effect. We're going to delete our public HTML file, move it to the trash, and empty our trash, right? So we don't have any site. So this is where our site actually lives. Krista's a geek, so we're forbidden. So what we're going to do is we are going to kick off this build. And this is going to do some real simple things. It's basically going to install our Drupal build. And like I said, if you can imagine, this is maybe downloading the most recent MCG build or whatever it might be doing. You can put in this spot. Once it does that, it's going to run a security recipe. That's being done again for our demonstration purpose, because the goal of our site is to use the default Drupal theme and have honeypot work. So the security recipe is actually what's going to turn on honeypot and a bunch of other security crap that we're not going to test. It's going to turn on our contact form because we need that to test to run our to achieve our goals here. It's going to install some QA tools just because they were already in the deliverables package and they're useful. And it's going to run a Wraith baseline. And what a Wraith baseline is going to give me is the first part of this file. So this is what the Wraith tool generates. Is it can do it as a slideshow, but that doesn't meet my needs for generating deliverables. So it's actually going to create this file as well as a folder for every page on your site, each one of these pictures in full. So you can look at each one of these in its full glory. And it's going to do that now because as it's running, it just crushed our whole build of that. So we're going to go back and make that come back. So I got my build installed. So I'm in the first.
Krista, so I'm sorry for interrupting. Just to understand this step better. So basically, what you're doing now is running some, I don't know, maybe Drupal installation script for maybe installation profile for a specific build, not build, but um, version of Drupal, let's say.
Right. It could
Then
be. Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
and in real world scenario, what this will do instead is download it from some other development server. Is this what the intent is?
Yes, absolutely. So I could be
Okay.
right now. I actually have one run that pulls down the latest build of the Rio install, and I do it in one click, and I love it because it makes me happy because I don't have to type so much because I type enough. Not that I have a problem with it, I just type enough. So yeah, it will. If the case was I needed to install a new site, it would do that. But yeah, you can substitute pull latest build from whatever repository in the world it's at, and actually it does all connect up to GitHub. I have gotten access to the Pfizer GitHub already, so I'm on my way. But we'd have to have the GitHub access set up, but we can take care of all that as well. So yes, in our world, this case, we just installed a fresh Drupal build for demonstration purposes, but this could have been any install or any pull of any Drupal site in the world you wanted it to be, as long as you had access.
Great. So the purpose basically to have the local copy of the site as it is somewhere else on development server, and then continue process from there.
Right, because in order for
Good.
Behat to run, you have to be local, right? I think you can run it other ways, but the best way for Behat to run is Behat has to live in the same place where your Drupal site is, right? And that's where integration with Druid could be helpful. So the next step of this is to compare our baseline, right? So this is going to generate our first set of deliverables. And what it's going to do is it's going to, when I first ran the Wraith, it created the first set of files we need, the first the first button I clicked. This one is going to create the second set. It's going to run our Firefox Behat only because I can't run them both together because my honeypot will break if I do, and I'll get an error, and that's not good for a demo. But technically, you would probably run all of your browsers here if you weren't Krista picking silly security things to test. And then it'll run our JMeter stuff. So we're going to build this one. One of the things, if you look at the dashboard that I have found, is the thing that takes the longest in my little process here is actually the creation of the deliverables. That's at about 2 minutes. And of course the running of the BHAP. But this creation of the deliverables seems to be one of the longer processes. But what we're doing now is we're creating the second set of files. So in a real world scenario, I would probably already have this Wraith set created, right? So I would already have the last historical images stored somewhere. And so when I ran this baseline, it would actually be comparing it to the last time I worked on this project. In the case of a new project, you're kind of running this just to get the gallery set up. The assumption is, in this case, it's going to match exactly because I'm literally running it minutes apart, right? But in a real world scenario, this would be a place where you would be able to identify any changes made to the UI since the last time you touched this project. Hopefully that made sense. And so it's going to run our BHAT. It already did our JMeter. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to create all of this little set of deliverables that you see here. So all of these other ones getting up into the 90s are all the ones we're creating now. This is the set from yesterday's demo. As you can see, I have my JMeter results. I have an aggregate and I have a result just from this one. So if that's needed, I actually ran a site audit, which turned out exactly like I would expect it to in a testing environment with some caching and stuff turned off and no content. So this actually looks, even though it has issues, I'm like, yep, that's actually exactly what I expect. So I was very, I'm happy to see that even with issues. I learned to know when issues aren't really issues. Me being a geek I am, I want a capture of this database as it is was at this point, because if I ever have to come back and recreate this, that database will be very instrumental in doing that. I've output a coder report because somewhere there's a developer who actually does want to read this. And my BHAT test, as you can see, is going to just drive me nuts through. I'm so tired of fighting with BHAT at this point, but it's doing my work, so I'm not going to complain too much. And it's also creating a BHAT as a summary of what your BHAT results are that you could send to the client once we clean up a little bit, and then be able to provide them, if you want, with a link to where they can actually click and get more information on this. And if Tim can find a way we can include the links, that'll be even sweeter. But at this point, it doesn't work there. On this one, however, because we're pulling it from a different, it's not using JavaScript on this one. It's just creating general links. But basically, you can see we've created a shot of that gallery. So you can have, again, a summary report of it. And in addition to that, you get a PDF for every page that it did in the site to kind of break that down, that summary down, and give you the details. And we are working on cleaning these up. We need to do things like make sure that these are labeled, so as a client, I understand what this massive stuff is you just gave me and can easily read it. So we're working on doing some of those things now. But it looks like our BHAT test quit running. Our deliverables are actually creating for what we just did. So that's going to actually create this 92. It's going to delete that in a minute and after it zips it up. Now, since I'm the one who built this, I know that once my site audit and my coder review is done, I can actually go crush my database and do any more work I need to, because the rest of this stuff is coming from sources that already exist. They aren't dependent on Drupal to get their information. So I saw my coder and my audit come up. So that means I know that I can move on to my next step. My next step is that a developer sends me a new build. So I get a new build from my developer. Before we go on to the next step, let me just show you my baseline. I did forget. So as you can see, my true baseline, the deliverables are created now. Everything passed. Everything on my site looks exactly like it did the last time I tested it, right? I have my BHAT test, everything passed. I have my screenshot tool. I don't have any differences. So I'm very happy QA right now. I am ready just to go on and do testing. And the next, after I do my testing and I get some updates, and so now technically I'm going to pull a new build from a repo. I guess I said technically, I'm really not. I'm actually running another recipe that's going to do some things to allow my demonstration to be the most beneficial to all involved. So we're going to run some updates, and after those updates run, I am going to go back and I am going to take a look at my site. Well, I can clearly see something's a little wonky there. So the next step is for me to compare to baseline, and this one is always going to kick off all my tests. So I'm going to run this again. This is the same exact one I ran the first time. So it's going to do all of the same exact things. Now I'm running this kind of close together because I have a limited amount of your time and I want to make sure we get through this. So we might actually be breaking our other deliverables package at this point, but in the real world, I would make sure that the timing was such that we didn't do that, and we're probably not going to go review those other deliverables. And so let's see. You can always go see if you do this that your Wraith is still running. You didn't break anything, but what it does is it destroys that folder and rebuilds it because all of the historical shots are stored somewhere else. So that doesn't mean it's broke. That just means you're waiting for it to finish. And one of the things that you'll notice is, oh crap, it's red. What happened? And there's BHAT, and I can clearly see what happened. I already knew what happened when I looked at the site. But now I can go back and I can very quickly see clearly this developer has lost his mind. This was supposed to be in the default Drupal theme, and he's changed that. Maybe the client called him. More than likely, the client called him and told him to change it, but she didn't know that one of the requirements was this. So we've quickly identified this problem. The next thing that's happening is our BHAT stuff is still running, and seeing the BHAT stuff running, I could see there too that it broke. So while my example is a little extreme, it works well for demonstration purposes to show you kind of how these tools run. In the same situation, it might be that, you know, the issues found are a little more subtle, but you would still be able to identify them. And the nice thing is you can address your fuzz and your threshold. So you can adjust your fuzz up so that if you know you don't want it to show so many errors and these sites are going to be a little different, spacing's a little weird, you can adjust that. And you can adjust your threshold so that 50% is a failing score, not 10% or 5%. So we can make those kind of adjustments to this tool. It's really slick. So our next, we're waiting on our BHAT test to run, but we can go, actually the lovely thing about BHAT is while it's running, you can actually view your test. And I can look and I can say, oh no, I do see that there's a problem already with my results. And my test's not done running yet, but I can already start seeing that there is something going on here. This test is to make sure that the bot doesn't submit, this form doesn't submit bot feedback. So basically this comes down to testing honeypot. If honeypot records too fast, you putting the data in too fast and hitting submit, it thinks you're a bot and it kicks you out. So this failing tells me that I know that something's wrong. So my two requirements for this project, as I said, were my theme be Bartlick and that my honeypot work. And as you can see, neither of those are working at this point. But as you can see, I've also identified them quickly because quite honestly, while these tests were running, I was on the beach drinking a margarita. Not really. I was probably on the phone with Shirley trying to figure out who did what. But in our case, our test, we found out quickly that there were problems with our build. And beautifully, it's creating the set of deliverables. So when I get done with this series, I'm going to have the first set that passed, the second set that failed, and the last set that should pass and match the first set, right? So I've got a nice set of information. And again, I know that if my site audit already created for what is now 93, as you can see, 92 did throw away the file to not build up junk in your hard drive, because I've had hundreds of these. There's Coder. I know audit will be out in a second. And now that that's done, my developer sent me two fixes. He sent me a honeypot fix and a theme fix. In the real world, what I would do right now is probably click update build again and pull from the repo. But for the purpose of the demo, we're just going to do a quick little fix using some drush commands and I think a recipe. And we're going to fix honeypot. And we did honeypot. We're going to fix, or we did one. We're going to fix honeypot now. So we're going to fix both of these, and our thing's running, and we know it's running. And for demonstration and time purposes, I think we'll be okay. So now that I've done all of that, the next step is going to be to compare the baseline again. My hope is right here now that I'm not going to break everything when I do this, trying to get this done in time. But then the next step will be, now that I've run my fixes, I've seen my failing results, I've captured my failing results, I have a record of my failing results, and now I've done the fix, and now I'm going to retest this, right? So I'm going to go back again and run the same exact set of tests. It's going to compare to baseline, it's going to do a Firefox test, it's going to do a JMeter test. In a better demo, this would have done Chrome, but like I said, because I did honeypot, if I try to do Chrome right behind Firefox, then Chrome ends up failing and it ruins the demo. But in the real world, you could have this run each different browser test that you needed to. So this is going to rerun our comparison tool, and our hope is going to be that our developer did know what he was doing and we did get this fixed. Yay, it was an easy fix. We know all we had to do was go, switch a setting. So we're all fixed and we're happy. We can see our BHAT test pop up, which validates that yes, in fact, it is fixed and we're happy. Um, and we can watch our BHAT report start to build. We know our test failed at the top, so we'll know pretty quickly here if we've passed and we can move on or not. Except for the one we got to wait for has that 14-second or 7-second pause or whatever it was I had to put in it to get it to wait. So, um, but once that runs, like I said, this next test should tell us whether or not we've accomplished our goals. And at that point, we can let the deliverables package create, know that our feature has passed now, know that the second test that failed to confirm that Honeypot wasn't installed is going to pass too. This is going to create deliverables. My site is now updated and looks right. That's my BHAT stuff building in the background. And basically now I'm ready to go. And that is how we hope to give you some faith. Questions, comments, concerns? What were you thinking, Krista's? Anything? Thank you, Evgeny.
So, Krista, from what I understand, basically what this tool is a set of tasks for Jenkins that run different things. They run Wrath and they run Behat, pretty much with JMatter and some other reports which are not like QA related, right?
Yeah, it was a lot more work than that, the way you made it sound. But yeah, that's the
I'm
general,
just trying
that's the
to
gist of it.
understand like the yeah.
Yes, that's what it is. If you want, these are a bunch of different JMeter things. We use WK, HTML to PMF, or PDF. We're using Image Magic and one other tool to generate all of the documents and stuff in the background. And so basically, it is really running a bunch of different Jenkins thing. My goal setting this up moving forward is to roll this out slowly into different programs and departments. Once we have a good candidate for it, we know we can test it on it in these kind of things. And that for base, I'm not, and I promise the QAs this. I will not just throw this at a QA and say, have fun. We are going to provide them training. They will not use it until they've been trained. And their first at least 1 or 2 projects, I will be involved and I will help them get it set up to make sure that it is working the way we need to. Because one of my main goals is to make sure that incorporating this into your program does not cause any negative effect. One of my top goals truly is to make sure to do that and to make sure that the QAs are fully trained and have a really good understanding of what they're doing.
Yeah, that sounds great. I wonder how exactly will we be able to use it. So maybe we can walk through a use case of a project that we are starting, for example. Like, let's say a new 5-page website, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say easy thing. So we got the SW signed. We know what the scope is. Could you walk through the steps real fast on what we'll need to go through to actually use it and get some results?
Initially, what we'll do is if you have a project that's a candidate to use the Faith system, we'll set up a meeting. So the PM, you, the QA, and the team lead would probably sit down, and I would say, okay, guys, which one of the tools do you need to use for your project, and how do you need to use them? I will sit down with you guys, make sure I understand which tools do you want to use, what deliverables do you want to create, what do you need this to do to best suit your needs. Once I understand that, I will make sure that all the tools we have can do that. I will get the project set up, test it, and make sure that it is working the way we need to. In the case of a new project, you may not have BHAT scripts. In the case of an old project right now, we may not have BHAT scripts. And we'll assess all of that, look at kind of what our inventory is of tools we have to work with, and then on each project decide kind of how we need to move forward. My hope being that once we do this on kind of each platform or portfolio, we'll say, that we've kind of set the standard for the rest of that platform or portfolio, right? So if we start working on MCG, when we set up one site to work this way, and MCG might be a bad example. The assumption would be that we could take the similar setup and use it on each new MCG project as it came along. So,
Right. So my question is more of, okay, so we discussed okay, we want to use it, how we can use it. So let's say we want to do testing with it, okay?
mhm.
And we want to take full advantage of this. We have 5-page website, it has one form and one carousel, the rest is static content.
Okay, that's
So
easy.
on this side, we had the kickoff call with you. Are you saying that you will be setting up each project yourself with this tool?
Initially,
Or
I will be working with the QAs to get them set up. I'm not going. I'm
okay.
going to be I'll hold their hand basically through the first one or two, right? Until I
And
feel
and
like they understand what they're doing. Because some of this stuff isn't stuff they've done before. Maybe not all of them can make Drush do handstands like we can, right? And so they're going to need to. There's going to be some training and learning. And my goal is, since you guys are doing all the allocation, you see, I have all this extra time, so
right. So
in that
what will be in that setup? What will need to happen?
what will need to happen. Once I understand what you need, basically, I will go and build you a. We have the server set up if we that we would set it up on, and I actually do have for all of our viewing pleasure. We do have a. We are using this for Rio to some extent now. NBC is this has not been promised in any way as a deliverable to them, and this is more of a project. So each QA would come in here and they would have a view of what they would be able to do. So if I got it all, Natalia and I are going to work on getting this all set up. We figure out what we need, we get everything up and running. She
So
would
when
come
you say
to.
you get everything up and running, what
Mhm.
does it entail?
So that
You'll be
entail that
creating
includes,
this
yep, building all
classes
of
in
these.
Jenkins, you'll be copying them from the template. So basically, I'm trying to assess how much work and what exactly is that.
Yeah.
So is it a lot of effort for them, or is just copying the templates and changing the path, for example?
Once we get done, it will come down to what you said. Yes, copying the template. But that's why I'm involved at the beginning. I'm going to help us to develop the template for each
Hmm.
program because they're all going to be different. So I'll come in and I'll help develop the template. As you said, that's a great way to put it. And then once we've developed that, the goal is that the next time Natalia can look at what I've done, copy that, and like you said, kind of fix it up a little bit. And if she
Okay,
has
so
trouble, I can jump in and help her. So the initial setup might be high, but I'll be involved and can probably talk Bill into, since this is a good investment, that a little bit of that time can come to Krista and that can be okay. I don't want this, like I said, my goal. I do not in any way want this to negatively impact your budget, your timeline, your
right.
project.
That's why I'm trying to talk through these steps so that we understand how we set it up, what
Absolutely.
effort goes into that, and then what benefit we
Yep.
gain from it, right? So first we create those steps, we got the initial setup done. What's next? I assume that we'll need to create some behead tests and
Yep.
create some site-specific configuration file with list of links or something. So what's next?
Yep. So once it's set up in Wraith or in Faith, then we would need to figure out what we were going to write BHAT scripts on. So with any project, we should always look and say, okay, what has to be manually tested? What can we not do with automation? And what can be automated? And we will divide
Right,
those
so
tests up.
our example is one slider on homepage and one form, other static content. So what will we do?
In that case, actually, it would probably be just testing. The BHAT could literally be just testing the form, or maybe testing the form in the slider. But the Wraith tool in this case would be what was useful for you because you had 5 pages of static content, so you would be able to check those. Now, where this comes in handy for you on this project is that 5-page site might be only a 5-page site with a contact form and a slideshow, but the next time they come back to you, they want to add this, and that to it, or things like that. And the first thing we want, or maybe they don't want to add a lot, but now we've got tests that we can run that would confirm that we didn't break anything. And I don't know, again, it's quite honestly, in the case of a 5-page site with a form and a slideshow, if it's how valuable it would be. In that case, we would want to look at, is this project going to come back to us? is it expected to kind of grow in size? But as I say that, I also think, but in a 5-page website, if we could automate the cross-browser testing, that's huge, for the comparison tool and stuff. So,
Right. So can we? I think that's what I'm trying to assess on this particular example.
mhm,
Is there a benefit of using this tool? Maybe not. Maybe, as you say, it's more of an investment upfront, and if we have projects down the road, then there we'll be able to gain some efficiency, and
right. And I look at
we can
something
discuss that. But
like Advil Canada. To me, this would go without saying. But something like maybe the little HCP sites that we used to do all the time. If we were only going to test this one time, it might not be a valuable tool. But if we know they're going to come back over and over again, for every time we know we're going to have to work on it, this tool becomes a little more valuable, right? Because we've built all this data. And again, the thing is again, to some extent, is even if we're doing just a screen capture and 1 or 2 BHAT tests, what we are doing is we're building up our archive of information so that, in the case of who knew, we would have been able to come back and say, oh, no, look, we tested it. Hey, the question mark was always a space away kind of thing, right? So even on a small site, it would give us this data and this history that I think could be important too. So and in a small site, it shouldn't be a lot of time to set up. So there is definitely value in the data as well as the activity of testing the site. Does that make sense?
yeah, so it makes sense in terms of the archive of how the pages look as of this moment. So yeah, that makes sense for the historical record and as well as for further comparison if we have
Well, and
projects after that. But for this project itself, are there any efficiencies, and will
yeah,
it help create to test anything, or it will be because all of those pages are new? There is nothing to compare it
right.
with, no
The
baseline.
other thing that you can do though with this tool would be as you move through the environments, right? So it starts off on dev, and the first thing we need to do when they move it to stage, right? Compare stage to dev. You can do a historical comparison, or you can compare 2 sites, right? So
Hmm.
one of the other things I would be able to do is automatically do dev to stage and stage to acceptance and acceptance to prod comparisons and
That's
have
good.
data to back it up. So that is another. This race tool is amazing. I couldn't love it more. And I think that once we really understand that, I've spent the last 3 weeks a lot of time on this, so I've learned a lot about these things. So all of these new ideas that you guys come up with are going to be great. I'm going to be very excited to do them, and we're going to work together to find the cool new ways that we can use this and how we can make it the best for us. But I was at the point now where I had to show it to you guys, or I was going to get too deep. So, but definitely, I think on your case, like I said, stage to the dev to stage to acceptance to prod, whatever, that comparison alone could be very useful and save you some time. And like I said, kind of give you a little sanity, give you the evidence that you need to know that the QA did what they were supposed to do and that things got done and that you have what you need to show the client if they ever question you. Any more
Yeah, I
questions?
think
Hello?
maybe
Hey, hey.
it would be worth to have another follow-up with Q&A and just more of the discussion of use cases. I know that
Definitely.
we
I'm,
just
I'm very
ran out of
excited
time
to do
already.
that. I've spent a lot of time
Cool.
talking about faith in the last 3 weeks. Trust me. My husband is
Thank
actually
you.
sick of hearing about faith at this time. He could do this demonstration for me like that now. Go ahead, Victor. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I actually have 2 questions. I listed them there. So one of them is whether there's a hosted solution, so this should be fast. Whether you have
Um,
already like a hosted, like a
Yeah, I do actually, and it's doing about 150 pages to the whole thing from get capturing both sets of screenshots, all the comparison, all the generation in about 20 minutes, which is awesome, and it got all of them. And Jay told me for $60 a month he can double my speed, so I told him I'd have to talk to somebody besides me. I don't have $60 a month. But yeah, we have a solution in place on a server, and it's really running well. But we're only
well,
running one. We're not like Pfizer where they're probably running 60 on there, right? At this point, we're only running
yeah.
one.
Well, it's good that you thought about this, and we have a hosted one, so we can actually test it out there, or other people can test it. The other concern that I had, and this is something that we face on most of our projects when we use the screen capture tool that Pfizer has, is how do you determine which pages you are actually are needed to be captured? So usually they give us some requirements: capture before and after for all the pages. How do you actually determine what exactly all the pages mean? Do you have like an XML sitemap solution, or
Yes.
do you provide manually the sitemap?
No, I went all automated, honey. I took you gave me a sitemap the other day, right, for UK? And that's the one we are going to test it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
I sneakily stole the sitemap for UK from you the other day. I converted it over to a text file, and I found this little tool that will, because I need to have a label for each one, right? And that's what, I just figured out what's broke. So I have to have a label for each one. So I found this cool little tool that will generate me instead of having to go through and to put 259 labels in by hand, I generated 259 labels that right now are page 1 through 259. And I automatically generated this file at about 3 minutes of everything I needed from your XML sitemap. And that's what I'm actually using. I'm going to assume there are better ways to do this, but we're still in the early stages. So we're trying to find the best way to make it all work. So I did make your sitemap work.
All right, because actually that leads me to my next. Well, so that's not actually a 100% accurate sitemap. Now, my next question, which is going to lead me to the third question, is whether you handle logged in users, authenticated users.
Yep.
So are you capturing screens between for authenticated users?
Absolutely, BHAT can do that. Actually, it doesn't. Wraith won't do that, but we'll set up BHAT scripts that will go through and walk through like an authenticated users and take screen captures and create an HTML file along the way wherever you want.
And how exactly do you do that? So if the requirement is to have the same exact user on both environments, so you are not creating the user on the fly, you are actually reusing an existing user.
BHAT creates a user on the fly.
So how do you compare it against production or stage then? Are you creating the user on?
Yeah, basically it would be based on role. So I would say I'm going to go in as an administrative user. I'm going to do this and that. And I think you can do it as a username too. And I'm going to take these pictures, and then I would go into the other site and basically run the same test and expect the same results.
So you are really going to the whole registration process with BHAT.
Yep.
On both environments.
Yep.
All right. And then, did you have a plan to actually capture like different URLs for authenticated users? Like the sitemap, for example, will give you or maybe a crawler that you might use might give you a comprehensive sitemap for anonymous users, but that will not handle all the all the URLs for logged in users.
That's a really good question, Victor. And no, I do not have the solution for that. These will be the things that we get to come up with together.
Okay, so these are my main concerns that I'm facing like every day.
Yep. So. And that's why you're here, because I know this can help you out a lot. So definitely we can find solutions to those. My assumption is going to be somewhere in the world Natalia has a list of them pages. If she doesn't, then how do you? So my assumption is that there's a list of these pages somewhere, or we would create one. And basically, once we created it, would be on record. We could keep it stored in this system and be always able to access it again. So the hope is that if these don't exist, we create them once, and then we don't have to do it again for the next time, right?
Okay.
But yes, all of these technical challenges, I hope to have the developers help me to work through. Anybody else? All right. It is 2:08. Most of you probably are 8 minutes late for your next meeting. I assume I should probably let you go. I thank you all for joining me today. If anyone wants to hang out and talk about faith, that's fine. But I'm not singing George Michael's today. Or Limp Bizkit, or Linkin Park, whoever it was that redid it. But I do really thank you all for your time. And if anyone wants to talk further, I'm happy to set up time. Anyone has great ideas I can add to this, I would love to hear them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.